confusing? Okay. 3, 2, 1. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the May 10th Board of Education meeting. Thank you for being here. Please mute your cell phones as we begin the meeting. Today is Tuesday, May 10th, 2016. And I think we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, sorry we're sort of running from one session to the other tonight, but we are getting started a moment late. We have approval of the agenda is next. Does anybody wish to amend the agenda? Rob?
Yes, I'd like to add an informational item, I guess it would be, where we learn a little bit more about what the administration is doing in response to the discussion that we had last time about funding charters relative through the bond.
Okay, can we add that as discussion item 9.4 then? Can we make that a motion to add that? I believe we need to vote on that.
Okay.
Can we have a second, please?
Hold on. I think that the motion was for an informational report, which would be 7.3.
Okay, 7.3. Okay, so I think that we've got a motion on the floor to add item 7.3 under information items to get more information concerning what the district plans to bring back to the board at the May 24th meeting, following our discussion at the April 26th meeting on charter school funding and bonds, correct?
That's the deal. Thank you.
Okay, may I have a second to that long motion? And if you want to repeat it, feel free. I think we have 2 seconds, or? Okay, we have a second and a third by Nate and David. Okay, I think we're ready to vote.
Yes.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. And that brings us to 4.0, recognitions and reports. Dr. Smizer.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Tonight we have 2 great recognitions, and our Executive Director of Communications, Danielle Clark, is here to introduce the honorees.
Thank you, Dr. Smizer, members of the board and community. This evening, we're going to recognize some outstanding students and some outstanding staff. So we're going to start with our 2016 ACE Awards, that's Association of Classified Employees, and Ms. Katie Montoya, president of our ACE Association, is going to briefly discuss the awards and the winners. These are classified employees. These are non-licensed employees, so these are folks like custodians, bus drivers, clerical staff, paras, and a host more who work so hard to help our schools function every day. And Katie is going to recognize our outstanding classified employees.
Thank you. Good evening. We're very fortunate in Poudre School District to have so many outstanding and creative staff members. But in addition to that, we're extremely fortunate to have over 1,600 classified staff members who are amazing. Each year, ACE recognizes some of our classified superheroes, as we did this year, for going above and beyond during the ACE banquet. That's also known as the best party of the year. And those of you who attended can attest to that. So I'm extremely fortunate to recognize some of the folks that were recognized that evening. They all couldn't make it, but we'll start off with Custodial's Don Morford Award. That's Devine Dominguez from Bolts Middle School. Transportation's Brett Holm recipient is Dale Olson, lead driver. And for Employee of the Year recipients, we have Joni Baker, and this is a long one, instructional para, school office assistant, health technician at Bacon Elementary School. I think she juggles too. We have Judy Parks, media technology assistant at Wellington Middle School. And Judy will be done at the end of this month. She's retiring. June Yasui, from Integrated Services Paraprofessional 2 from Rocky Mountain High School.
These aren't in order. They just like to see me juggle these.
Oh, you and Joni can juggle it.
There you go. Thank you.
We have Randy Robinson, Media Technology Assistant at Dunn Elementary IB World School. And we have Carol Yassi, School Secretary and Administrative Assistant to the Assistant Principals at Poudre High School. And those who were unable to join us this evening are Sarah Sandoval Aragon, School Secretary at Irish Elementary School, Shelley Densberger, Centennial High School, and Becky Woodcox, Media Tech Center Site Manager at Shepherdson Elementary School. And she's actually with a group of students presenting at the Ed Tech Forum tonight. So she's doing one of those things that instilled them to nominate her for this award. So I'd just like to say again, congratulations to these exceptional people, and thank you for recognizing them tonight.
Well, I want to congratulate all of our winners, and I want you to know how much the district appreciates everything you do. But when I look at this group, I'd like to think that you're really the glue that holds all of the district together. You're really what binds us all together, and I really appreciate all the work you do, and thank you on behalf of the board.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I'll give you
You won Colorado Regional Knowledge Bowl? Colorado Regional Knowledge Bowl? State. Okay. Next, we have Mr. Will Allen and Miss Martha Craner from Fossil Ridge High School. If you will remember, they were unable to be here last month, so we are honoring them for the 2016 Knowledge Bowl State Championship. So come on up and bring your students with you.
Good evening. Thank you, Board, and thank you, Dr. Smizer, for recognizing us this evening. It's exciting when you win a state championship, and I think we all associate state championships with a certain moment or a certain time in our own high school career. And I'm more proud of these young men and women than words can express, because I too was a member of the Knowledge Bowl team in high school, and we never won state, I'll tell you that. But the number of hours and the commitment that they give over the course of the year is unfathomable. And to see them in action, I actually stood at the back of the room at the state competition, and I thought, do I know that answer? I don't think I know that answer. And they're fighting over who gets to tell the answer. So I just want to take a minute and say how proud I am of you, and how proud I am that you represent our school, and you do it with grace and poise and integrity. And you always are amazing in how you reach out to the other teams and you acknowledge their hard work as well. So thank you for that. Now I want to introduce an amazing woman who's an incredible educator in the classroom and outside of the classroom, Ms. Martha Craner, who spends more hours than anyone ever wants to know working with these young men and women. So I want to let her talk a little bit about the competition and their title.
First of all, I don't know if you all know many teenagers in this day and age that will
dressed like this every other Saturday from December through late March and April. So that's quite a commendation right there, because whenever we go to play, we mean business. These students set a goal as ninth graders that they were going to win state, and they have been so dedicated and so diligent. They're my heroes, and they're going to change the world. I just cannot say enough good things about these students. We have a picture up in the back of our entire team. These 4 students played at the state competition the entire time, 570 questions. Things that schools are about education. They were asked about any kind of subject at all. I don't know if any of you know what kind of lungs spiders have or not, but they even book lungs. They know things like that. And they spend hours and hours and hours to be the best in the state. Every tournament that we have won in the last, 4 years, 3 years, you participated in, we have won. And we won handily because they've worked so hard. And they are true role models for other students. So I'd like them to come up now and introduce themselves. And the other students couldn't be here because of AP testing, but I do want the other students to be recognized as well, because it takes our entire team to do well. So, Jonathan, you want to come up?
If when you introduce yourself, you could also tell us what other schools you've gone to on your journey to get here and what year you are, that would be very useful. Thank you. It's our tradition.
My name is Jonathan Mullins. I'm a senior this year at Fossil Ridge High School, and I also went to Zach Elementary and Kennard Middle School.
My name is Isabel Wallace, and I'm a senior, and I also went to Pioneer Park Elementary School in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and Preston, here in Fort Collins.
My name is Steven Sue, and I'm a senior at Fossil Ridge High School, and I went to Riverside Elementary and then also East Junior High in Boise, Idaho.
Hello, I'm Clifton Sutherland. I'm a senior here at Fossil Ridge. I obviously went to Fossil Ridge, and I went to Preston before that. And then for elementary school, I was a proud attendant at Evergreen Elementary in Holman, Wisconsin.
And since so many of you are seniors, can you just tell us what your plans are for next year?
Sorry. All right. I'll be attending Wheaton College in Illinois to study pre-med.
I'll be at St. Olaf in Minnesota to study political science.
I'm going to be staying here at CSU to study mechanical engineering, biomedical, and then also music performance.
I will be attending the University of Minnesota for International Affairs and History.
So on behalf of the district and the Board of Education, we want to tell you one more time just how proud you students make us, and I want to give you this award. So congratulations.
And that concludes our recognitions this evening.
Thank you very much. That brings us to community comment. Do we have anybody signed up for community comment this evening? Did I miss it? No.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I apologize. We're not to community comment yet. We just flew by the superintendent and board report. So those of you who are there to do community comment, you have to listen to us first. My apologies. Dr. Smizer.
Just a little bit. I promise I'll be brief. Thank you. So I had the wonderful privilege of attending with so many people from the city of Fort Collins, the Arbor Day celebration at Olander. Interestingly, so children got to hear from arborists for the city, and the city donated and planted, I actually can't remember how many trees, but it was more than 10, a lot, and one that it was very, very large that we're all hoping will make it. The music teacher was amazing and had them all sing this song about trees changing the world one tree. I'm telling you, there wasn't a dry eye from the adults in the place. And the head arborist for the city of Fort Collins was at Olander, I believe he said 20 years ago, when it was Olander's turn for Arbor Day. So, it takes about 20-some years to get around to all of our elementary schools. And he personally had helped to plant the last group of trees that are now enormous. And so he was telling the children to come back 20 years from now and go find your tree. It was very fun to see the kids name each tree. And one of them is named Groot. If you know your movies, that's pretty good. I am Groot. There we go. Some of the other things that I've done since the last board meeting, I gave a presentation to one of our local Rotaries about the effects of poverty on our schools and particularly on our students in our schools. I had a regular check-in with Darren Atterbury from the city of Fort Collins. I was able to attend the scholarship luncheon from PRSEA, amazing group of young people chosen by an amazing group of retired employees. I attended the Denver Area School Superintendent's Committee meeting and the Superintendent's Digital Transition Symposium, both down in Denver last Friday. And then Cruz Elementary Principal interviews, which we will be having a new principal there. Employee Groups Scholarship Breakfast, which was in this room just a few days ago. And then PSD's Foundation Annual Breakfast was truly amazing, and I'm sure they will be bringing a report to you soon about how much money was raised, how many people attended. It was much more attendees than usual, and I believe they broke their goal for fundraising by quite a bit of money, so congratulations to them. They raise money for teachers to use in classrooms, period. That's what their money goes to. They grant money to teachers who have great ideas of things they want to do if they only just had a couple $100, and they make those dreams happen. The CASE Annual Awards Celebration, we had 2 principals who are Principals of the Year. Tom Dodd is the Middle School Principal of the Year for the state of Colorado, and Mel Mearsma is the Assistant Principal of the Year for the state of Colorado. So we have 2 in our district this year, so I got to go help honor them. I've been interviewing principal candidates for PGA. Continue to meet with individual leaders of our faith community who have been very great to meet with and just good to get to know. My purpose is to get to know them and to see just to open communication so that we can talk to each other and communicate, see where we could coordinate with things if necessary, or simply just that we know each other's name and know that we could pick up the phone and call if we need to. The ACE Employee of the Year Banquet, the Superheroes Award, which was really fun. Employee negotiations, which we did conclude last week. And then PEA members at the end of negotiations, there's a subgroup of PEA members who traveled to DC and are really studying ESSA, the new No Child Left Behind legislation, and what that might mean for our district. We also have staff members who are doing that work and trying to figure out where are there opportunities for us. The legislation has loosened up on some of the regulations that might give us some opportunities. There's also some new waiver opportunities where we might want to do something more innovative. So we're trying to stay on the front end of that conversation and see what that might mean for us as a district, for our students. There we go. So I visited Kennard, Zach, Lusher, and Irish, and McGraw, Cruz, Dunn, and Poudre High School. since our last board meeting. I have to say, it is a very busy time of year at the end of the year in all of these schools. I actually had to cancel a couple because it's such a crazy time of year, and I just really enjoy visiting the schools. We have amazing teachers, amazing kids and families and parents. I see volunteers in every school I go to, and many of our schools have a theme, a type of education they provide in. Many of our schools are classic neighborhood schools. Each one is so intensely proud of what they do, and they are doing their programming with a lot of care and a lot of attention to detail, and really working hard to improve what they do every single year, year after year. It's just very impressive. And a few things that are happening in the district. Multilingual Poetry Slam, hosted by Latin American Student Association. The GEMS program is hosting a STEM Learning for Girls. CSU awarded 6 of our student groups with Cesar Chavez Awards. High school students previewed medical careers at Poudre Valley Hospital. The CTE student leadership organizations have been working. CTE stands for Career Technology Education, and we had 39 students take first place and qualify for national competitions this year. And Teacher Appreciation Week. If you Google or look on Twitter or look around the country at this time of year at Teacher Appreciation Week, you see the most heartwarming expressions of love and appreciation for teachers that just happens this time of year all across our country. And so thank you once again to our teachers for all the work that you do for our students. Here's a few of our teachers engaging with students. You know, we use the word in education, engaging, a lot. Doesn't want to move. And it's, you know, basically we are trying to open their minds and get them to participate with us in the learning experience. So we don't want them to be passive, and we don't want them to be bored, and we want to tap into what their interests are. And that's what we mean when we say engaging with students. Lincoln Middle School, congratulations to 6th graders who created the coolest sandbox ever. I don't think that's a national award, but I like it anyway. So topography studied using augmented reality sandbox, pretty cool. The Police Youth Academy is taking applications for its 15th session with high school students. It is a 5-day behind-the-scenes look at possible career in law enforcement. Cash Laputer 6th graders service learning project at Laurie State Park. Getting our students out to contribute to the community they live in. And I think that's it. Oh, we're preparing for graduations. It is the best time of year. It is the most hectic for both parents and teachers and staff and everybody. And yet it is the culmination of our dreams for each one of these children to send them off with well prepared and ready with hopefully some idea of what they're good at and what they're interested in and what they want to do. And so we look forward to all these graduations. It's always a good time. Summer preparations are already underway, not just for vacations, but I will say that our construction projects for this summer are already underway. Several of you are in buildings that are going to be major red zone buildings this summer, and we've started pulling wire, starting doing everything that can possibly be done while kids are still in the room has already started. And that's my report.
Thank you, Dr. Smizer. And as we have a new board tradition, he needs the, okay. We have a new board tradition we started last month of doing a joint board report, and we are passing the honor of presenting that amongst us. So tonight, Director Trask will be presenting our group board report. What has your board been doing?
So what you're going to find out is how much of my problem with clickers is mine and how much is the clicker.
I have been paid to screw up. I just want to point out this is an aggregate list of 7 activities of 7 board members. So it looks long, but it's divided up well. There was a click, nothing happened. Let me try it again. Whoops, there we go. Fix it, please. There we go. Okay. She'll help me along here. We've got a lot of different categories that we've participated in. The Board of Education has done outreach. For example, 2 members met with the City Council for an informal meeting on the swimming pool. We met with a principal visiting from JFK School in Berlin. We visited potential school location sites. We've attended the PSD Department of Language, Culture, and Equity feedback session and individual meetings with constituents on a variety of subjects. There we go. Other meetings, extra meetings with the Audit Committee, the Board of Education Retreat, District Accountability Committee, District Advisory Board, Early Childhood Council of Larimer County, the Fuyana Early Childhood Center with program specialists, and the PSD Foundation Board. We have legislative activities. These included in the last month the Colorado Legislature, the Joint Budget and Joint Education Committees, sessions on school finance study, Board Legislative Subcommittee. We've met with the DAB Legislative Subcommittee. We attended state representative town halls, and we followed up with legislators regarding positions on bills. We do school visits. In the last month, we visited Bethke, Dunn, Irish, Lopez, Tavelli, Lesher, Weber, Polaris, Mountain Sage, and events at schools, the PSD Elementary Students Cooking Challenge, the PSD Middle School Honor Ensemble Performance, met with Opportunities Unlimited class at Poudre High School with Representatives Polis and Buck, and the O'Day Gardening Club. We also went to Poudre High School IB mock interviews, the Polaris Presentations of Learning, the musical comedy Murders of 1940 at Poudre High School. I need to shape up my eyes here. And the Rocky Mountain High School baseball games. And community connections included the PSD Foundation Breakfast, Project Smile Luncheon, Center for Family Outreach Breakfast, Cultivate Hope Fund raiser for Matthews Home, Workforce Development Meeting, Trade Industry Field Trip to Denver to look at 3 apprentice programs in Denver for pipe fitters, iron workers, and electrical workers. And celebrations, PSD GED recognition ceremony, the Centennial High School stairway graduation, the employee group's scholarship reception, the Poudre High School Scholarship Awards ceremony, the Rotary Scholarship presentations, the ACE Classified Dinner, celebration of excellence and Employee of the Year awards. We also, put my glasses on here, attended this afternoon the retirement recognition of PSD employees. And then also, as it shows on there, last Friday, one of our long-standing people you never see here hiding behind that window, running our television for us and everything, Herb Sapperstone retired, and we had a ceremony for him. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other additions to the board report? Okay, I think that finally brings us to 5.0, community comment. Do we have anybody signed up for community comment? Are you signed up in the back? Okay. Are we? I can. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. We have 5 people signed up tonight to speak on non-agenda related items. First, we have, since some people are new, I'm just going to sort of go over procedures. Everybody has 3 minutes. There's 3 little lights up there. The yellow light will come on when you have 30 seconds left, and the red light goes on when your time is up. So if you can just wrap up your thoughts at that point, it would be appreciated. But first of all, we have Cheryl Beckett. Thank you very much for being here.
So, members of the Board of Education and Administration and Community, Cheryl Beckett is my name, and I've been around the school system long enough that some of you could have been in my preschool, which started, I was the first out of CSU lab school, preschool in 1965. And then I worked with Head Start, and I have worked throughout my years involved with students, neuromuscular integration, and teaching for the CEUs for the Colorado Department of Education and so on. So I was most amazed to see that the Department of, or the Office of Equity and Diversity was being eliminated. And I just feel at this time it is very short-sighted, and I don't know what we can be thinking to let go of that office. I also am currently the chair of the Not in Our Town Alliance, working for a diverse community. And we have people all the time that are coming to us that are experiencing challenges. I know that the school district would have had a lawsuit on bias in hiring had Maria Gabriel not been there connecting. I think that I have been on the board of, or the council of Equity and Diversity, which brings together community members, CSU, Poudre School District, and the downtown community, and that serves as a very positive way. 2 years ago, we had a forum that actually, for the NIOTA, one of the things that came forward as a major need was for people to feel that they belonged in this community. So I just make a plea to rethink this. You will lose a very important person in Maria Gabriel if you give up that office and give her up. Thank you very much. And I apologize, I need to go to another meeting that I will be late for, so
it's perfectly
thanks for the
fine. We're
time.
used to people leaving us. I don't know why we aren't more riveting, but apparently not. Vic Smith, please. Thank you for taking the time to come and talk to us.
Good evening. My name is Vic Smith. I'm the chair of the Human Relations Commission for Fort Collins, but tonight I'm speaking on my own behalf. At a time when the city of Fort Collins has identified equity and inclusion as key components in a socially sustainable community, I was surprised to learn that the Poudre School District is planning to eliminate the position of Family, Community, and Equity Coordinator, Dr. Maria Gabriel. As individuals and groups within the Northern Colorado community understand and are becoming more aware of the importance of promoting equity and inclusion, PSD's Family, Community, and Equity Coordinator has worked to provide inclusive learning environments for all students, including those based on protected class status, such as race, ethnicity, gender identity, gender expression, and so on. In conjunction with her role at Poudre School District, Dr. Gabrielle has been instrumental in organizing a recently formed community equity initiative that includes stakeholders from several organizations. They include Poudre School District, Colorado State University's Office for Diversity, Vida Sana, Larimer County Department of Human Services, Poudre Fire Authority, CSU Center for Public Deliberation, the City of Fort Collins, several diversity consultants, and the Fort Collins Human Relations Commission. This community equity initiative has tapped into Dr. Gabrielle's vast knowledge, her skills, and her clear understanding of the challenges working toward equity for all students. Reflecting Dr. Gabrielle's commitment, this growing cooperative initiative strives toward inclusion for all. So while many organizations are pulling together to recognize the value of working toward inclusiveness, it's difficult to imagine what Poudre School District could gain from eliminating a position that is making a significant difference. By halting the progress of an effective leader who has a strong background in culturally responsive practices, how will Poudre School District join the larger community to lead the way toward equity for all students and families? I encourage the board to ask questions about this decision, and I encourage the superintendent to evaluate the ramifications and the potential outcomes of this choice, and I hope you will ultimately demonstrate your support for all students by reinstating that position. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming to talk to us tonight. We appreciate it. Mr. Priesnick.
Mike Prusnick. Let me start off with a couple of good pieces of news, because I usually have mostly problems to speak about here. The last time I was here, I left my voice recorder here, and the IT staff found it, and they plugged it in. They thought it was a flash drive and started deleting my files. And wow. And Danielle Clark contacted me and admitted and fixed her mistake with it. And I thanked them for that. I didn't yell at them. I didn't complain about them, because what do you expect IT staff to do when they find something like this? Plug it in, start looking at the files, figure they don't know the files, they look like they're worthless, and start deleting them. You know, I can't blame them for that. I blame myself for leaving it here. And I thank them for finding it and turning it in. It would have been so easy for them to realize that they deleted my files and throw it in the trash and for it to never be seen again. And yet they had the character and the integrity to admit and fix their mistake, and I really appreciate that. And after the last meeting, I contacted Rob and I emailed him about my concerns to follow up with that. And he responded by, refusing to admit and fix his mistake. But did I focus on that in my response? No. Instead, he said in one part, "I wish you would take the energy that you are spending around this and spend it on something that would benefit the students of our district." So I chose to focus on that, and I responded by saying, okay, let's talk about sustainable school funding models. Unfortunately, that's where the good news ends, because Rob ignored my request and gave me silence. So what am I supposed to think about that at this point in time? I'm kind of confused. I don't know where to think here. But what I will say is the Will Allen and the Martha Craner that you saw here tonight are not the ones that I know. Over the last couple of years...
You are not going to disparage our employees in person. This is an opportunity for you to talk about issues, not personalities.
Okay.
If you're going to do
I
that,
said okay.
You are out of here.
I said okay. So my statement is that there are a number of issues here, and the question is, how are you going to deal with them going forward? We have a number of issues that I have lodged to you that get absolutely no response. No one responds at all. Not an acknowledgement of the complaint, not that anything has been done, not that it has no merit, nothing happens. There's a problem with the processes that this board is using to conduct its business and to interact with the public and its parents and its students. And you need to think about these issues and find ways to resolve them. Because as long as I continue to make complaints about things that I find that have merit and they get ignored, I will continue to find ways to escalate it. Thank you.
Next up, we have Bill Wurst.
Members of the board, my name is Bill Wurst, and I'm a parent at Liberty Common. Unfortunately, I could not attend the meeting 2 weeks ago. However, I did watch the video replay. In communication with Kathy Kipp, it's my understanding that you plan to have a follow-up discussion at your meeting on May 24th. I'd like to call to attention the email I sent to you on May 4th, proposing ideas on how to treat charter schools equitably. There were discussions 2 weeks ago amongst the board about the definition of equity, wondering if it is a formula. There was even a vote on an additional $200,000. When you consider equity and how you can direct your administration to take action, I suggest you look at three things. First of all, is it perceived that PSD is treating charter schools students as a less important member of the PSD community? Second, do I recognize that the top performing schools in my district by most academic measures use a curriculum that was pioneered and perfected by the first charter schools in the district? The curriculum, which the school board sued their parents over implementing, is now in such high potential parental demand that PSD needs to add another set of classrooms at Zach Elementary. Similar innovations could be forthcoming from the Montessori and the Mountain Sage Waldorf charter schools. Liberty Common and Ridgeview have freely shared their successful curriculum and teaching methodologies with Trout, Zach, and Kennard. Third, ask if the administration of the district is making things needlessly difficult for charter schools. Are the facilities already built fully utilized? Can you demonstrate that PSD gives charter schools access to facilities, buildings, land, and resources which may be underutilized before we ask taxpayers to pay for additional buildings for students who do not leave and live in the district yet? Why do we change athletic policies that punishes charter school students and reduces participation in sports, and then turn around and ask taxpayers to build new sports facilities? In my email, I suggested multiple ways that PSD use existing dollars that could better meet the legitimate needs of charter school students. 2 weeks ago, David Trask voiced concern about the last-minute nature of those requests. I do not consider it a last-minute request. In spring of 2015, I personally met with Dave Montoya, Pete Hall, Ron Alexander, and Edie Eccles about the topics in my email dated May 4th. To make it simpler for PSD to reach out to charter schools, last September, they appointed Patrick Albright to represent them. Patrick understands the trade-offs and limited dollars available. Has your administration actively engaged with Patrick to float ideas of what PSD is willing to do to support charters and what would be helpful to charters? I ask that by the time the PSD board meets on the 24th, that a more serious effort to include and respond to the need of PSG charter schools takes place. We've continually reached out to be inclusive and cooperative. Now, if you're going to ask for the support of our parents, you need to reciprocate those efforts by not only listening to our concerns, but also taking actions and making substantive proposals. I look forward to the outcomes in the discussion on May 24th. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Eric Sutherland.
Good evening, Eric Sutherland, parent of an 8th grader. I have a few words this evening about a very general topic with a lot of nuances, and that is the number of out-of-district students that attend the Poudre School District schools. Preface that with the same motivation I've expressed many times. I want for every kid, to have the same opportunities mine has had in getting an education, and that would be, every child, that includes students in other districts. However, the large number of out-of-district students in the school district right now does present, certain room for thought in the whole thing. When out-of-district students come into the district, they do not bring mill levy override and bond dollars with them to supply that. If you look at the numbers, we could easily say that a very large percentage of the very expensive modulars that have had to been constructed at schools were made necessary because of a large number of out-of-district students that if they weren't going attending our districts wouldn't be necessary. And, it's conflicting to talk about it because, if people want to go to school here and they see some value, it's hard to say that we should be denying that. But at the same time, it's a conversation piece that needs to be talked about. And, it really does have a significant amount of bearing as far as the long-range plan is concerned, because I do not understand exactly, but it is a very large number that would have to be increased from out-of-district students in order to get these new schools functioning at an efficient level have expressed concern before about that, particularly as it might impact neighboring school districts that would be deprived of the students and the state dollars that come with them. And since making that comment and a few other public statements that I made, newspaper article that appeared in the Coloradoan, et cetera, I've been contacted numerous times by parents who see this as a significant problem. And they bring to my attention something that I knew about but probably didn't quite scale properly, and that's the fact that there's a lot of out-of-district students that self-report as being in-district students by using false residence addresses on their applications. So we don't really even have a handle about how many happen. I've just in walk of life, I've met people who do that simply because they want to attend PSD schools. And so it all falls into the category of topics that need greater consideration. And I'll throw that in there just to, augment a concern that I have about this whole process, this discussion about the long-range planning process, which I thought was rather controlled. You ask for a very large tax increase like that, you really should expect and actually invite scrutiny, and I think that was rather difficult, but this is one topic that needs further examination and a report back to the taxpayers who will be asked to vote in November. Thanks.
Thank you. That brings us to 6.0 consent agenda. Does any board member wish to pull any items off of the consent agenda? Okay, seeing nobody who wants to pull anything off, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Nate?
I move that the board approve and adopt the recommended actions for the items on the consent agenda.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Carolyn?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye?
Yes, aye.
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 Okay, next up, that brings us to 7.0, which is informational reports. Dr. Smizer.
Well, I'm happy to have Darcy Vogt-Tipka here tonight to talk to you about Safe to Tell. She'll give you history and background, but this is something that is not new to Colorado, but we just want to give it another push and make sure parents and students and everyone in the community knows about it and how available it is. And in the fall, we've committed to actually trying to push it out into our schools and make sure each group of students that come through our system are very aware of it. So take it away, Darcy.
Thank you, Dr. Smizer, and thank you, President Kipp and board members, for allowing me to come and speak to you about Safe to Tell. It is a prevention tool that we have used in the past, but are going to use even more in the future. So just so you know, Safe to Tell was founded on the idea that prevention and early intervention is the key to preventing violence and saving lives. The goal of Safe to Tell is to intervene at the earliest possible point of a young person who's struggling and help them when they need it the most and before a situation might turn into a tragedy. It was created and provides a tangible solution, and it combines extensive research from the U.S. Secret Service study on school shootings, a bystander study conducted by the U.S. Department of Education, and then recommendations from the Columbine Commissioner's report. So as you see on this timeline here, it did come about really around 2004, but it was also a tool that wasn't that well known or that well used. It was also something that came from the state and wasn't funded well. They were at one point asking school districts to help fund this. Also, our own school district had created a different kind of reporting program called Report a Bully, so it was more around bullying, where Safe to Tell was more around reporting all sorts of things. So in 2014, the Colorado General Assembly adopted the Senate bill that incorporated Safe to Tell under the Colorado Office of the Attorney General. And so we were fortunate to have the Attorney General staff come to visit us on April 1st, and many staff, along with Dr. Smizer and school staff and so forth, came and heard the latest and greatest about what Safe to Tell is. They also pointed us to many resources that we now are going to be using that we didn't have in the past. So Safe to Tell is definitely a collaboration between all of our PSD central office departments, our schools, and our law enforcement. And again, we'll be no longer using the PSD internal report a bully system, and that is because it's not anonymous. It's somewhat cumbersome. It's hard to find, and so forth. And we find that Safe to Tell is a much better tool. So our security department has submitted updated administration contact information to Safe to Tell, and they continue to update that as changes occur. And so our system is already up and working. And as of this school year, we've received 22 reports across 9 different schools, just so you have a little idea. Again, we want to stress that we try to teach and educate our students that the best way of reporting this is to go to a trusted adult. Talk to their parent, talk to somebody in the school. We much prefer that, and that is going on all the time. But in those cases where they don't feel safe to tell, we want them to use this. So how does this work? So again, it is anonymous, and it's a highly sophisticated database, and it's very encrypted. Even if a student or someone makes a phone call, you don't know what the phone call, where the number is coming from. Folks can report via phone, via a web report, so you can go online and just fill out the web report. And then now, just recently, they did a mobile app, and it can be done on any smartphone. And I loaded that up while they were doing the presentation. It's really easy to use and access. And that's where we're seeing now a huge shift of the reports coming via the web or phone. Now, most of the reports are coming via the mobile app. And then the tips are answered 24/7, 365 days of the year, and it's answered by trained Colorado State Patrol communication professionals. The report's sent to appropriate school principal, our law enforcement agency, and PSD security department. And then it does require a disposition report on each tip. So how does PSD respond? When a tip is received, PSD and law enforcement collaborate on necessary interventions and appropriate responses. Intervention and responses may include mental health and risk assessments by our team, a police investigation, school and home visitation by either our school staff or by law enforcement, and then, of course, our principal inquiry and investigation. I do want to go back just one here. I'd like to show you just this quick little video, an example of the resources that are available to us and for schools to use and so forth. So there you see the website across the top, and they have different videos. The first one's a very lengthy video that explains it in depth. And here's one on our principal. But here's just a real quick one that kind of gives you a nice overview. So that's just one example of the many resources they have online. So in your packet, I think each of you hopefully have this, or you get this later, get this later. And it has more information than you would possibly ever want to know about Safe to Tell, but it has lots in-depth reports and so forth. And one of those I wanted to point out on the right here is a fact sheet. And they do these on a monthly basis and a yearly basis. And I just wanted to point out that the three most common reportings that are tips that are given are around bullying, drug and alcohol, and suicide intervention and prevention. So I think those are really important. Then you see all the rest of the items there too. And then on the left, it just shows an example of what the app looks like on your phone and how easy it is to upload. Again, here's an example of the things that you can report on the right. And then I think one of the neat things they have on their resource is this, what they call a student lounge. And so again, when you go on the major website, you can click on whether you're a parent, whether you're a community member, whether you're an educator, or if you're a student. And this one's called the Student Lounge. And it has all these topics here. The students and other folks can click on and learn more about it. And since bullying was really the #1 overall report, let's just click on that. And you see it talks about how you can deal with a bully, what to do if you are bullied, how to prevent being bullied, how to avoid the situations, what not to do, how can you help a victim of bullying, talking about bullying is a big problem in society and in our schools. And then they give more resources to go to. So that's just one example of the many that students can access as well as staff. So how do we raise awareness in our schools? So again, Dr. Smyser had mentioned that we had received this presentation. Last week I got in front of the principal groups, elementary and secondary, and got them more re-familiarized, or if they didn't know about it before, learn about it. And there's all sorts of ways we can get the word out. We can do that through posters, student cards, IDs, banners. We could communicate this during class time, health and wellness classes, morning communications, announcements, school assemblies, parent nights, etc. So again, on the website is a wonderful student education toolkit. Let's go back. So here we have a student education toolkit. Explains what it is, and they have really great videos that are geared towards an elementary school audience, and more resources for schools, along with classroom letters home to parents, and activities and so forth. And then here's a video for secondaries, for middle school and high school, and again, more resources. So they really made it easy for us to get the word out. So these are just examples of some of the posters that you would find online, and you can print these out yourself, or you can actually order them through the Safe to Tell office. So that concludes my update on that. I also have Melanie Bugley-Morris, our mental health and prevention coordinator, and also Norm Bastian from security, and Pete Hall, too, from facilities. It's, like I said, it's a joint effort through our departments to get the word out, and so if you have any questions, we'll take those.
Thank you all for being here tonight and for that great presentation about this wonderful resource. I think I see a couple of hands. Rob?
Yeah, I have 2 questions. One of them is, I understand that the 22 reports this year so far represents a significant growth relative to previous years. Do you have some insights into why the growth has happened?
I think partly because we are beginning to get the word out. I think some schools have already been talking about it before we even had the presentation, and we knew about the free resources to us. So I think the word's been getting out for certain schools, and also the report of bullying just hasn't been as good, and so that's why I think people have leaned more towards doing this.
Okay. And so the second question actually follows on that answer a little bit. You say that the 22 reports have come from 9 schools, and of course we have site-based management, and there's some discretion, if you will, about how each school shares information about this. I guess the question is, what's the accountability mechanism to make sure that all of the students in the district are aware of this?
Well, this is a work in progress by all of us, and so I've been working with the assistant superintendents at both levels, and we're going to come up with a plan for more or less a rollout for that and determination of how we make sure that all. So I don't have an answer exactly for you right now, Rob,
Okay.
but we do plan to have some accountability measures behind it.
So when do you think that's going to be in place?
I would say by fall.
Okay, thank you.
Did I see somebody else had a question? Okay, that was a phantom hand then. Thank you. Oh, Dr. Smizer.
One of the things, we heard a couple things that are, in my mind, interesting. One is that the statewide, they're seeing the app itself is changing the whole game because kids always have their phone on them, so it's so easy for them to comfortably and anonymously report anything they just saw, including taking a picture of what's going on. I mean, it's interesting what the app has done, which is reasonably new. And then our principals also report a lot of students coming with issues and complaints on Monday morning. And this, well, they can do it all weekend. I mean, they do prefer to report in person to a trusted adult, but if something happens on Friday night or Saturday afternoon, they're not going to see. So the principals get all these reports come in on Monday morning, and this can help students to just know how to deal with it immediately.
Those are great points, Dr. Smizer. And I was really intrigued by some of the examples they gave of other districts where kids were reporting in classroom. So they saw something that their classmate had in their backpack that they shouldn't have, and they went online and went on their phone and made the report right away. And by the end of the class, there was an administrator at the door escorting that student out to meet with them and taking care of that. So that's how quickly it can occur. So I think that was another aha for us too to understand.
Christoph.
I was just going to say, it doesn't look like I'm the only member who downloaded the app while you were talking.
Congratulations.
It looks pretty, really pretty simple and straightforward to use. It's very powerful.
And that could be why we're seeing an uptick too of reports, because of that's available to students also.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and thank you guys all for spending your Tuesday evening with us. We do appreciate all of you being here tonight. Thanks. Okay, that brings us to 7.2 for our early childhood annual report.
Dr. Lambert.
Mrs. Kipp, Dr. Smizer, board, thank you for having us on tonight. Dr. Smizer earlier in her report talked about this is the best time of year to see the graduates, and we see as we exit our students out of the system what a great job they do. It's also a great time to look at our youngest kids and the remarkable growth that they have in the course of a year or so with our outstanding early childhood teachers. I could go on and talk about all the great things in early childhood, but Carolyn is going to join us tonight. Carolyn, come on up. And she'll share all of that. But before she does, we got some exciting news today, and I want to share that. We just put this on Carolyn a little earlier, so she was a little surprised, but it's good news. We learned earlier today that a partnership between the Heckinger Report and PBS, they've asked that Poudre School District's Early Childhood Program be one of 3 programs featured on a national report, a feature they're going to do, and they're actually going to send a crew into Fort Collins next week. So Carolyn's a little stressed at that right now because she's got to put some things together, but boy, we'll take that kind of stress anytime. I'm going to turn it over to her because she does the hard work and knows a lot more about this than me. Carolyn Martin.
Thank you, and good evening to the board, to the cabinet, and to our community. It's the 3rd spring that I've been able to come in front of you and talk with you about the early childhood program, and in particular, increasingly, I think I'm able to report on how we know about all the really valuable things that have happened this year and what we're doing with children. So part of that was in the presentation package for the board. You've seen a detailed annual report, so I'm going to hit just a few of the major high points in the overall presentation here for the whole community. I do want to tell you, though, I saved one really good piece of data for this very evening because it was a surprise for us. And so just as a reminder for our community, the program has transitioned to a competitive 5-year grant. And so during that 5-year grant period, we're assured of funding, but there's quite a good deal of monitoring and reviewing from the Federal Office of Head Start. And so they're looking to see how we've done with the goals that we set. And the goal we set around attendance was really very ambitious. We looked at the research that showed that children won't do as well in second grade if they haven't been attending as 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds in their pre-K program. And so our 5-year goal is to get to the point where most of our children are attending 96% of the time. And this is a goal that's quite a lot higher than the Office of Head Start's goal of 85% for us. But we know from the research that this would be a way for us to go above and beyond. So with attendance in our first year of the 5-year competitive grant, our goal was really just to raise awareness. We wanted staff, community members, families to know more about the importance of attendance. But the really cool thing was that we got results. We did also change one of our behaviors in the program. Previously, when a family showed any sign of attendance slipping, a pattern of missing every Monday, being absent for 4 days in a row, we would go ahead and just send a letter to the family and tell them that they needed to attend. We're now having our family mentors, the home visitors for the 3 to 5-year-olds, reach out to all 900 families in the program anytime they see a pattern of concerning attendance. And so it's had an impact already. So rather than just raising awareness, I'm really pleased to show you in this slide that in 14-15, at the very end of the year, in May, we had a 90% aggregate attendance rate. Again, it's well above the 85% that the Office of Head Start requires. But that this year, we've, in 15-16, got a 91% rate, and we expect it to increase in May. We usually have really solid attendance in May. So we've got a really nice result. So that's the one piece of data that you don't have in your packet. I didn't put it in there because it's a little further than we expected to go in our first year with this, but it's really exciting to share with you. Additionally, we're also certificating children who have 96% attendance now. Last year we had 176, this year 201 who will receive those certificates for 96% or better attendance. So seems like a lot is going on with attendance. We also are taking a look at our student achievement, and you have the information in your packet. In particular, right now, the way that we've designed the snapshot is really to take a look at a focus area. Our grant goal for 5 years is to take a look at how we're having impact on children's expressive and receptive language. And so this year, your data is really focused on how each age group did in relation to 2 of our TS Gold measures, items 8 and 9, expressive and receptive language. And so you've seen the aggregate results for that. So that's an important baseline. That is the baseline data that we established for this year. In particular, what we'll do moving forward is to really take a look at our families who, well, our children, who are struggling and are related through the 5 gap areas. So these are the same gap areas that you look at when you're looking at students' achievement on the state tests. So is the student poor? Is the student racially or culturally different, speaking a different language at home? Does the child have an IEP? Did they come to us behind, just generally developmentally? And so we're looking at our baseline data and then disaggregating it in light of those 5 areas where children and families might need additional supports, and really working on an MTSS approach in the upcoming year that will help us address those things. And the other really cool thing to report to you about that is that that's going on from prenatal. So we work with some families while they're still expecting their children all the way through 60 months when a child graduates and moves on to the kindergarten programs in Poudre. We have also had a lot of successes with our partnerships. We have really worked on our professional development, our collaboration, our coaching. We are grant funded, so the people who are interested in our work that we need to report to include the Colorado Department of Education with our CPP funds, the Office of Head Start, and all of the 2,262 performance standards that they ask that we address really effectively. They include community partners who want to know how we're doing with children's health, with lead tests, with their annual physicals and immunization. So there's a great deal of partnership work that goes on in compliance for us. The Colorado Department of Human Services, again, is another important partner. They license and regulate all of our school sites as child care center sites, and so we need to work with all of them. And we've had some really nice successes this year. I think particularly I'd like to call out, I haven't paid attention to any of my notes, and now I need them for this one, so I'm going to need to turn there. But in particular, there have been some really remarkable partnership results from inside Poudre School District. So I would say that the partnership with Language, Culture, and Equity, where we now have an ELL-focused instructional coach who's working with people on the strategies to implement for children who are English language learners, is working very well. Integrated Services continues to be a very fine partner for us with really good coordination and collaboration on the fully one-third of our students between the ages of 3 and 5 who have IEPs. Information technology has been a very, very strong partner for us this year. I know we started the year, and I think that one of the look-ahead pieces that I gave you last year was an effort that we were going to have to really integrate the computer system that we use in early childhood to report to the Office of Head Start, Child Plus, and Synergy. I'm not sure that we're going to actually be able to do that. It looks like that integration will be difficult to achieve, but we have made major strides actually in working with the two systems in parallel now. And so we really look forward to this upcoming year being able to dive in and parse our data out using the demographics from our system and the student achievement data. So there are just a rich number of great things that happened this year, but I'd also like to make sure I leave time to respond to your questions if you have them or comments.
Okay, board members, do you have questions or comments? Was that, oh.
That's.
I wasn't sure, was that your questions part?
It's not, that's the last
Oh,
slide.
okay, I wasn't sure if you were finished or if you were, no, never mind.
I really am ready for the questions
Okay,
right
we
now.
really are
There's
ready for the
nothing-
questions.
yeah, nothing
Questions or
further to
comments, board
present.
members? Rob?
I'm just curious, what's in the way of integrating the two IT systems? Is it money, or they just, what is it?
I think that if it were something like that, we might be able to succeed. As I understand it, it's actually that when we add the data to Synergy, it gets in the way of accurately reporting some of the results that need to be pulled out of Synergy for state reporting. So, so it can interfere with the count of children at a school site, for example. It won't do to have an additional 32 children in the early childhood program goofing up the average of the whole state scores. So it's that kind of thing. And so I think it would take kind of a huge amount of vigilance for us to make sure that those kinds of errors weren't introduced in the system if they were integrated.
Thank you.
David?
Kind of an aggregate data question. If we take all of our kindergartners as a group and say, what are the different experiences they bring to that classroom? How many have been in this program, that program, the other program, and so on?
So I can tell you that we're at scale in the early childhood program in Poudre School District, meaning that 1/4 of the incoming kindergarten children have been with us for either 1 or 2 years of preschool, and some of them coming in have been with us since before birth. So that's a great diversity of experience levels right there, remembering that the children who come to us from pre-birth to 36 months have a home visitor in their house once a week for 90 minutes, providing parent education. So it's a significant input for the family and for the child also. Then, of the other 3/4 of the children coming into our kindergarten class, fully 1/4 of them have attended another preschool program in our district, and 1/2 of them come to us with different kinds of experience. Some of them have had a little bit in another state. Many of our children come to us with no experience whatsoever.
Carolyn?
Well, Carolyn, I want to thank you for a wonderful report and for all the good news. It was really an uplifting report. And then I also wanted to know if you could kind of touch on some of the other things you're doing, like with the oral health with the kids. Those are such wonderful little anecdotes. So if you just want to tell us a little bit about the oral care program.
Absolutely. So I think that one of the finest things that I can say about our program is that we're able to leverage the multiple funding sources, the CPP money, the Office of Head Start money. We blend it all together and we kind of pull out the highest quality features and then but apply them across the board. So the oral health that Carolyn is referring to is one that's actually required of us just of the children who are funded early Head Start or Head Start, and that's about 383 children. But we do it for all 1,000 children in our program, and that is by leveraging the efficiencies of working in a school district and having good, tight communications and good partnerships also in our community. So I would say that without some of the dental health organizations in our community that partner with us. I'm not sure that dream would be such a good reality. But the thing I always like to tell people is that of that quarter of the children coming into kindergarten who've been in our programs, there's nothing wrong with their teeth or their mouth. They are able to crunch apples, eat carrots, get vitamin A in their system. There's nothing holding them back from eating the healthy foods they need to feel well and learn really well, and nothing preventing them from speaking and talking clearly and well as in addition. So that's one example. I think another example is the partnership with Integrated Services, where we're really careful and closely look at every child. Each child who enters the program is screened. The results of the screening, if they're at all a question mark for us, we really put it in front of another group of people who consider whether that child needs to be assessed or monitored once they go in the classroom. And so any needs of children in the early childhood program get identified pretty readily. And so we've got about half of our IEPs are speech language, another half of them are children with more extensive needs than just speech language, about 354 this spring. So those are two examples. I really could tell you a lot, but it's a short time.
Okay, I guess I do have one thought I would like to express, and keep in mind that the board doesn't make day-to-day decisions on how people are treated or anything like that, but we sort of express opinions from time to time. And one of the things that sort of has rubbed against my grain since my kids were probably that age is programs that give out like recognitions to kids for attending school. And it's not that I don't think attendance in school is important. What I think is a problem is when we're rewarding children for coming to school and giving them incentives to show up sick or ill or things like that. And I guess that's always bothered me. I mean, I remember them giving out certificates when my kids were in elementary school like that. And for us to, as a school district where we want kids to stay as healthy as possible, for us to start giving out rewards to children and recognizing them for something that may be out of their control, I do appreciate the efforts to improve the attendance, and I think that's awesome. I guess I just have, it rubs me the wrong way when we're rewarding people for it. I mean, I've heard about it in the workplace too, when people feel like they can't, they're so important to the workplace that they should show up as sick as a dog and contaminate everybody else and spread the problem further because they're that important. And I guess I just don't think anybody's that important that we should encourage that type of behavior. But other than that, thank you for all of your great information. I do appreciate it.
And a little more information about some of we do. I want to respond to what you said because it's a really important consideration. And I myself was sick 2 weeks ago with influenza B and could not actually get up. So it is, nobody's that important. My program ran just fine while I stayed at home and healthed up. I would say to you that the reason that we're really focused on attendance with our families and with vulnerable families, most of the families come into our program with risk factors that make us wonder about how they're doing on measures of family organization. And so we are working with our families on their organization, and the attendance rate is a really good way of measuring how well our families communicate with us and organize around the kinds of things that happen when children are young, including illness. And so we have a really nice system and a well-devised one through our attendance line, the way that parents report an absence, the way it gets to be an excused absence and doesn't, so it's only unexcused absences that are used to calculate our attendance rate. So I hope that helps reassure you that we're not encouraging any children to attend ill. I mean, it's really difficult to learn.
Okay, well, that's not how it was when my kids were in elementary school. So I'm glad you guys have learned from that experience. Oh, Carolyn.
I guess what I heard Carolyn saying is that they were trying to identify kids with that were consistently missing Fridays or maybe consistently missing Mondays because families maybe don't know how important it is for their kids to attend school, every day and not stay home because maybe like she talks about like organizational problems about, well, on Monday, dad's tired and so nobody wants to get up early to take the kid to school. And so what I think I heard you saying is you're looking at those patterns of absenteeism that might tell you there's some other underlying cause of why the kid is not being there.
Very true, and we're really considering the absence anytime you miss time. So if you're a half hour late every day, boy, that racks up over the course of a program that's just 2 3/4 hours long. So, yep.
No, and please don't get me wrong, attendance is wonderful, and we should have more kids, especially in high school, attending all of their classes all of the time, because it's not okay. Even, I'll just tell you a small anecdote, 'cause I have 2 seniors this year. One of my seniors said he got chewed out by his calculus teacher for not going to senior ditch day, and he thought I'd yell at him if he went to senior ditch day, so he didn't even do that. So my perception may be a little bit warped. Susan, did you have your hand up?
Carolyn, since immunization is not mandatory in our state, what incentives, what do you give parents, what motivations to get their kids immunized before they enter your program?
We have a really nice medical team. So they're very well organized. Nancy Weber, who heads up the district health, is also part of the early childhood leadership team. And so she manages all of those measures of our success with that, including the immunizations. And so she does use the waiver. Families can opt out of immunization, but we have a pediatric nurse on staff. And so she's able to go when those 108 children who are in our early Head Start program are very small and educate parents about the benefits of immunization. So we're right there in homes. We also partner really closely with a visiting nurse program for, that's something else that happens through the Larimer County Department of Health and Environment. So that program also educates families and provides quite a lot of good and detailed information, I think, that helps to put parents in the place where they can make the choice for their family.
And Christoph.
So I was just wondering if, in light of some of the other initiatives in the district, would you know how much are the kids going through your program being tracked statistically as they move their way through the school system?
That is a really rich question, and it's actually a requirement of one of our grant funders. So the Colorado Preschool Program would like to know how children are doing on their 3rd grade tests is the measure that they like to. And so that's a piece of data that was included in your package. And it's exciting because this is the first year that we've actually tracked that data. It's for a smaller number of students than we'd like. So right now, and it's really complicated with the IT systems, we're having to go back to the old Silk system, where we used to have children's demographic information. So that's a couple of computer systems ago. But that's when those children were 3 and 4 years of age, when that system was still in use. Then we have to find the right kids with the right date of birth, find them now in Synergy, correlate that with what the achievement records are, and so it's complicated work. So we're increasingly doing that. I think we've had a good first start, and there's more to do.
So we might hope that 5 years from now, we'd be able to support the type of work you're doing by studying relative to other students, their performance,
Very
and their
much so.
outcomes, and okay.
Very much so, and the early childhood program would like to support the work of the board in terms of ensuring that many of the most vulnerable children and families in our community have had consistent support, that we've really told the data story that helps us do the handoff from pre-K to kindergarten and on. So, so yeah, there's a lot in front of us.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for spending your Tuesday evening with us. I'm sure you had nothing better to do because, you know, these are exciting meetings, I know. But thank you for being here nonetheless.
To come to the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, 7.3, we have a very longly titled issue, which I don't think I can repeat the entire thing, but it had to do with charter school bond district follow-up conversation about what will be coming back to us on May 24th. So,
Okay.
who wants to start?
How about if we
you wanna-
start? Dave Montoya is going to take the lead on this one, and then we'll take it from there. We'll tell you what we're thinking, and you can ask whatever questions you have.
Thank you. So I was typing out some thoughts as this came up. So don't have an official presentation on this. So let me just start off with just summarizing what I think is going to happen. At the last board meeting, there was considerable discussion on the district's long-range plan. Most of the discussion focused on the district's ability to use bond funds on charter schools. The administration understood that the board did not have the information necessary to make an informed decision at that meeting and has subsequently engaged outside counsel to provide that information. Outside counsel will provide the board with the necessary components that will need to be met to allow an agreement where bond funds can be utilized by district charter schools. This information should provide the board with enough detail to allow the board to make a decision whether the board wishes to pursue such an agreement. The district will provide this information to the board for review before the May 24th board meeting. Okay, so that's one bullet point. Additionally, the topic of additional spending beyond those identified in the long-range plan was also discussed at the last board meeting. In response to this discussion, the district continues to work with RBC Capital Markets to fine-tune the financial plan, which may include a bond premium at the time of issue. So the reason I bring that up is it's something that I don't think we've talked about in the board meeting, but I want the board to be aware that at times when we issue bonds, premiums can be driven by market conditions. And so let me describe to you in very simple terms what that means. It's also something that is very hard to predict. So it's something that you may not want to budget for because it's really driven by market conditions. So what happens is when you go out and issue bonds, RBC Capital Market will issue those out onto the market. And at times, investors may look at those bonds and say, okay, the par value is this, but the bond would be much more valuable in my portfolio if I were to modify it and pay a little bit more to get a little bit more interest. And so that's something that happens in the market, and that's why we hire somebody like RBC Capital Markets to issue those bonds, because it's very complicated. In the current rate environment that we're in now, what districts are seeing is premiums. Now, we can also have the converse where it's a discount where investors don't provide the par amount on those bonds. We're not in that environment right now. That's typically in higher interest rate environments you would see that. But what can happen is when we go out to issue these bonds, there may be premium that comes along with them, which is additional money on top of the par value. I just want that to be part of the conversation too, so that the board is aware that we may have additional money that comes from a premium in addition to any unspent money that would be determined at a later date. We talked about not using all the reserve that was built into the plan, or if things come in under budget. But those two pieces I think are important to bring together, and so that the board's aware of that. Let me just make sure I identified everything I wanted to talk about in here. I think that's it.
In conjunction with the last conversation about premium, I think what we had also intended was to talk to you about how confident are we, or how did we make the estimates of costs that we have? So what do we think the likelihood is that we would have to spend the premium just to finish the projects? Or how likely do we think there would be any money left over, and how are we making those estimates? So we wanted to talk to you about that, about how firm do we think our numbers are, and why.
Yeah, and I think that's, and around the premium, I want to cautious us to not think too far ahead. That's a very fuzzy crystal ball we're trying to look at as to what the market will be yielding in November or December, because things can change very rapidly. So it would be, I think, a mistake for us to plan and budget to spend that premium. It may be something that we identify as it comes in, identify that we may have that and additional unspent money if we come in under budget on other projects that could be utilized to further go down the list of the long-range plan. So those were the 2 points that I wanted to make. We'll provide that information, both pieces, or at least what our best guess at what a premium might look like before the May 24th meeting also, so that you have that information.
I believe if I could add a third bullet, we were also going to give you the information that we have available to us without spending a lot of time gathering more detail about how our current charters are funding their facilities, how much money they receive from the state, and in which kinds of ways. How does the state fund charter facilities other than the local boards taking action? So just some picture about our 4 different situations, because they're each very different, what that looks like now.
Did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I didn't know whether we were done or not.
It looks like,
Okay,
go ahead.
so I have two things relative to what you just talked about, or what Dave just talked about. Well, actually, I have three things. The first thing is, you said you're going to provide the information prior to the board meeting. Is that in the normal packet, or are we going to get something earlier? Do we know?
My thought would be that that would be included in the board
Fine.
packet.
Okay.
We probably will not be getting that information from outside counsel until midweek next
fine.
week, of which is already past the board packet deadline from the board secretary, so we'll try to squeeze that in as quick as we get it.
Okay, I appreciate that. I did want to address the question of bond funding with a little bit of a statement here, and then I have another question for you, Dr. Smizer, if that's okay. So, in thinking more about the discussion we had about additional bond support for the charters last week, or last meeting, I realized that my thinking was pretty fuzzy and my explanations were therefore pretty muddled. Instead of talking about goodwill, though of course I do want goodwill between the charters and the district, I should have pointed out the following. During the process, a decision was made that funding from the bond can't be used in the charters for assets PSD cannot recover in the event of a status change of those charters without some other way to recover the value, such as an ownership stake. Based on what I understand now, and perhaps we'll hear something different from the bond council, but based on what I understand now, I agree with that decision. However, that effectively ruled out HVAC replacements, parking lot repairs, roof repairs, and other kinds of capital maintenance that were on the list from, in particular, from Liberty and Ridgeview. And those kind of things were obviously considered for other PSD schools. Not to mention building or land acquisition for the newer charters being ruled out by those kinds of rules. I believe that it's possible that if that limitation were not in place, the charter schools might have been allocated more money to deal with at least some of the capital repairs that they talked about. That's why I supported the additional allocation of bond funds for charters on the provision that PSD gets some kind of ownership stake. There was some confusion about where I was coming from last time, and I wanted to clear that up. It's really tied up in that process, and I'll reserve further comment on that until I understand more about what's going on from the bond council in terms of the rules around this. But it sounds like, from what you're implying at least, that that's not going to change. That we're likely to need some kind of way to get our money back, if you will.
Well, let me be clear with what we're asking council to do. What we're
Okay.
asking them to do is to identify what would be necessary to structure that agreement.
Okay.
So it goes beyond just what the rules are. I think it goes deeper than that to say, we would need to get this information, we would need to get this from the
Fine.
charter schools. It will be much more in line with saying, these are the things that you would need to do, and then with that information, we're hoping that the board can make a decision, yes, we want to do that, or no, we don't.
Great, okay. So just following up, Dan, I just want to say that regardless of the outcome of a discussion about allocating additional bond funds, I do want to see, and I think I heard Carolyn talk about creative ways to continue to work well with our charter schools going forward. And so one of the topics, perhaps not for the meeting on the 24th, if that's the date, it's the 24th, yeah, that I'd like to see is some discussion of how we're working with the charters now and creative ideas about how we can continue to evolve and improve that relationship. I'd like to see that get on the agenda at some future meeting, perhaps not in the context of the finances, but I think that's important.
David.
It has struck me throughout all this conversation, there's been somebody who's never been at the table for these discussions, and that's the people who prepared the plan which we're discussing. And if they felt there was a chunk of money left over, what was the preference of that committee as to where that money be spent? Now, we can override that, but we really haven't gone back to get any input from that group to say, because we came up with a prioritized set of expenditures based on the amount of money that was presumed to be available. But I kind of feel if you have a committee and they do a lot of work, you don't want to just say, oh, when push came to shove, we said thank you very much and left and went on. I don't know how we could get input from the chair of that group or something like that. But it might be fair to get that information as well.
Rob?
Yeah, I guess all I would point out, I mean, I think that's fine. All I would point out is that to the extent that we consider changing the limitations or being willing to enter into agreements with charter schools, assuming, of course, they're willing to enter an agreement with us, which, you know, is open, as far as I know, nobody's expressed a willingness to do that, and that was not brought up at the time by the charter school representative at the CFAC meeting at the time the allocations were identified. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make in response to what you're talking about, David, is that we'd be changing the rules effectively. The rule at the time, the limitation at the time, which, as I say, based on what I know, I agree with, is that, you know, no ownership stake, no significant money for those kind of repairs that we're talking about. So we change the rule, then they might think differently, or they might not, or whatever. I don't know.
Christoph?
I think I'll just speak up and say that I kind of like Rob's idea, maybe a work session topic on this. I think what's come out of all this discussion has something to do with finding mechanisms and ways that we can get creative and work better in the future. I do wonder still whether we're a little bit late to the game to make changes to the plan as we have it, but we have to be thinking about when we next approach these kind of topics, you know, whether it's 5 years from now, and how we might have relationships that work better together. And I note, you know, to David's point, when somebody starts telling me that geez, maybe we'll come up with extra money, my brain starts turning, and I go, okay, well, how could I spend? There are a lot of ways we could do it. But we actually do sit on committees with the city, for example. We sit on committees, all sorts of committees, and we interact with all sorts of groups, and we help ourselves understand those issues. With our charter schools, which are public schools within the systems, I think the board often feels like we barely know each other, you know, and I think that's what we might want to start putting our minds to and getting creative about, and that's why the work session topic or something to that effect would be a really interesting one. So I'll support what Rob was saying.
Great. Anybody else on this topic? Okay. Oh, Carolyn.
So when I was suggesting creative things, I think just like Christoph, that, you know, that we're pretty well into the process for the long-range plan. And I think if there was extra money that was to be had, we'd have already figured out where that was going to go. So I don't think that the issue for me right now is like the money in the bond. The issue for me right now is the relationship and then the creative things that we can do with the things that we already have. So do we have a facility that we can let the charter schools use for, you know, musical performances? Can we let them use an athletic field on the weekend when it's not being used by the traditional district schools? And those are the things I think that we can start looking at, things that we already have, things that we can already do, as far as getting creative about different ways that we might be able to help them out.
Great. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Well, good conversation. I guess we will revisit this topic again in 2 weeks. So, in the meantime, this brings us to 8.1, elementary instructional materials adoption for mathematics. And we do appreciate you all being patient with us while we got to this topic tonight. So we have Curriculum Instruction and Assessment Director Robert Beauchamp and team. Perhaps you will introduce your team for us.
We're going to get set up, and then I'll do a little introduction.
Sherry's here.
So thank you for the introduction, Dr. Smeisser, President Kipp, Board of Directors, cabinet and community. So we have recently finished a major mathematics adoption process that we began well over a year ago. And tonight it's our pleasure to share with you the process that we engaged in reviewing and evaluating the various mathematical instructional materials for grades K through 8 and also for our algebra, geometry, algebra 2 programs. I have two wonderful facilitators here. Before I turn it over to them, however, I think it's prudent to mention that while tonight we're bringing to the board a program that was recommended by the elementary committee for action tonight, the adoption presentation that you're about to see was actually the process that we engaged in with our elementary, our middle school committees, and our high school committees. I'll also like to mention that we are in the last or final stages of coming to an agreement with the programs that were recommended by our secondary schools, and we hope to bring that to the meeting at the 24th. And I'll add a little bit more onto that at the end of the presentation here. But it's my pleasure right now to introduce two wonderful math facilitators. We have Megan Kerponic here, who is our mathematics facilitator. She really focuses on our secondary schools and led two of the groups. And then Kelly Shank is our mathematics facilitator who really targets our elementary levels. Megan and Kelly.
Thank you for having us. So we're going to start off just kind of walking you through the process, as Robert said, but before we jump into that, I'm going to introduce to you two other mediums by which we worked throughout the communication. So we have two different websites. We've published information on Poudre School District's website, but then we also have a Google site that all three of our committees used kind of for transparency. So I'll just walk you through those briefly. So this is our mathematics textbook adoption website, and again, it's elementary, middle school, and high school all in one place. This is where we directed all of the teachers that were part of the committee, teachers throughout the school district, as well as community members, to be able to interact with our textbook adoption process. So on the website, you'll find for each part, you'll find community members, or committee members. So it'll list for each chunk of teachers that were on our committee, and as well our parent community members, where they came from and what their role was within the committee. We also have our norms, so each of the three teams agreed upon norms, and they're all listed here. Our daily overview just kind of walks you through each step of the process, and we'll highlight some of the dates and some of the things that teachers were doing on each one of the committees. We have a page that is dedicated just to artifacts, so this is where you'll be able to find data and feedback about each one of the programs and all of the information throughout the process. And then finally, a page about the standards, so looking at the Colorado academic standards, the Common Core state standards for mathematics, and the standards for mathematical practice, as we had to look at all three bodies of those to honestly analyze the textbooks. On the Poudre School District website, we also put out there some information about the textbook adoption. This goes hand in hand with our parent and community toolkit that we've brought to the Board of Education in the past. This is a great opportunity for parents to gain information about each one of the programs, particularly the ones that were piloted, and then be able to identify a place where they could actually submit feedback. And we'll talk a little bit more about that process. So back in spring 2015, as Robert said, we began this process over a year ago. We started out with an application that was sent out to parent and community members as well as to teachers and staff throughout our school district. Some of the things that we were looking for was, why did a person honestly want to be on this committee? We didn't just reach out and hand select people. We wanted people who were truly passionate about math education and the textbooks that are used in our classrooms every day. The teachers who applied to be on the committee also had to be willing to pilot. So throughout the third quarter of this school year, they went through a very rigorous pilot program in which they had to pilot 2 different programs with Fidelity for an entire topic in their classrooms and step away from what they were currently doing in the classrooms. Within that, at the elementary level, we were looking for 1 teacher per school. And then we balanced grade levels from pre-K all the way up through 5th grade. At the middle school system, we looked at 1 teacher per feeder system, and we focused on teachers representing 6th grade, 7th grade, 7th/8th grade, and our 8th grade courses. And at the high school level, we looked for 1 teacher per feeder system per course, focusing on Algebra 1 geometry and Algebra 2. We also had 4 middle school 8th grade Algebra 1 teachers on this committee and 2 middle school geometry teachers representing that middle school voice among high school teachers. We also included a teacher from Centennial High School as well as a teacher from Polaris on that committee. So last spring we met, each one of the committees met individually, and we called this day Setting the Lens. This was their opportunity to dig into the standards, to take a look at the textbooks that we currently have in this district and analyze what's working well for us and what are our needs in the future. So they got a chance to truly ground themselves in what are the standards for mathematical practice, and what do we want out of a textbook. So before they even started to look at what the options were, what were we looking for as a school district to truly meet our needs and take education in mathematics to that next level.
So there were 12 publishers that you can see up there, and each of the committees started out with a different number of textbooks. So the elementary committee started with 14 different textbooks. You can imagine what the warehouse would have looked like at this time. 16 at the middle school level and 15 at the high school level. And so after we did this setting of the lens, we started digging into the materials. But as we dug into the materials, we used a national tool. It's called the IMET. It stands for Instructional Materials Evaluation Tool. And that is a very rigorous, deep tool. That is taking what the publishers of our standards deem to be necessary in a resource for teachers to be able to teach mathematics. So we took the IMET and we split it into 2 days. It is so rigorous, we couldn't possibly do it for all of those textbooks. So we were going to make a cut after day 1. So we took half of the IMET, and the parts that we did, you can see up on the screen for day 1. We talked about the major work of the grade level. So the textbook had to give 75% of the time in the textbook to the major work of the grade. And we can talk about what those things are later if that interests you. So there also had to be vertical alignment within from grade level to grade level. So the standard had to be taught at the correct grade level in those textbooks. So if multiplication was in 3rd grade, we didn't want to see it 1st and 2nd grade in a textbook. And then we also had the balanced approach, which the standards have called for, in that we need equal intensity of conceptual understanding, procedural skill and fluency, and application. And so we took all of the textbooks through that material evaluation tool on the first day. And after the first day, we narrowed it down to 5 to 6 programs at each level, at elementary, at middle school, at high school. And those textbooks, those 5 to 6, went through day 2 of the rigorous evaluation. And there, we really looked at the coherence, the standards for mathematical practice, and really the accessibility for all students, from intervention kids to GT kids, to English language kids, special ed, all of those different areas. We really looked into whether these materials would be accessible for all of those students. So I just wanted to take a moment to let you know that everyday math that we have been using in this district at the elementary level for many years did not make the cut after day 1. We had a nice discussion as a committee as to whether we should push it through to day 2 or not. So it scored very, very, very well at the major work of the grade and the vertical alignment. It scored perfectly in those categories. It didn't score poorly in the balanced approach. It just so happens that it was 7 out of 12, and the other ones that were pushed had 11 out of 12 or 12 out of 12 points in each of those categories. So the committee really talked about, if there's 5 other ones that are scoring that much better, is there really any need for us to go further with everyday math? And they decided that there was not any need for us to do that. So these are the textbooks that made it past day 1 and day 2. We had 3 at each level. So at the elementary level, we had Eureka Math, Go Math, and Envision Math 2.0. Middle school, we had Glencoe, Big Ideas, and Connected. And at the high school, we only had 2 programs that made it to that point, which were AGA, which stands for Algebra, Geometry, Algebra 2, and Big Ideas Math. So at this point, we asked the publishers to come and present to us for 2 hours and talk to us about what their program had to offer and what teachers could expect, what students could expect, what parents could expect. And after that day, we made the decision to eliminate one of them and only go through with 2 for the pilot process. So at the elementary school, all teachers on the committee piloted both Eureka Math and Envision 2.0. And at the middle school, all committee members piloted Big Ideas and Connected Math. And at the high school, all committee members piloted the AGA series and the Big Ideas Math.
So this is a little bit more information about the rigorous pilot process. Some important things to point out is that it did last the entirety of the 3rd quarter for our teachers in our school district. And as Kelly mentioned, they were asked to pilot both programs at their course level. So what that looked like was teachers taking some time to truly analyze in depth a topic and see it through. So for example, if a teacher decided to teach about the Pythagorean theorem, they weren't to use a resource just to teach a formula, but they were to truly look at the balanced approach. Could they teach it conceptually, procedurally, and with application throughout that entire topic and see it from start to finish? So a lot of our teachers had an opportunity to utilize the assessment tools throughout it as well. We wanted to dig into all of the components. Along with that, we asked for feedback during this pilot process throughout that 3rd quarter from 4 different stakeholder groups. We asked our teachers who were piloting the process to fill out a very rigorous evaluation feedback form. We asked then also their students to fill out that form. So to give us some feedback about what it felt like to be a student walking through this textbook series. We asked non-pilot staff members within schools, so this included principals, it included paraprofessionals, it included just building staff that supported teachers, as well as teachers who weren't actually piloting the materials. And then finally, we asked our parent and community members to analyze the materials as well. So as I said, it ran throughout the 3rd quarter. It truly began on the first day of the 3rd quarter, and teachers were asked to send home letters to their students' families, just letting them know their child was going to be in a pilot test environment and encouraging them to give feedback as the parent of a student who was walking through this process. Some other things to point out is that teachers on the committee went through a rigorous technology process. So we asked them to pilot not only the physical textbook in front of them, but what did the online learning environment look like for their students? So many teachers were able to assign activities, have students watch videos, and engage in the information online. And they were able to assign homework assignments as well as assessments. Given that teachers were taking on 2 different programs with very differing components, that was a pretty rigorous process for them. During this 3rd quarter time, we also had the materials on display for public review. They were on display here at the JSSC in the lobby. We also had the materials on display up at Livermore Elementary School to enable access to our Mountain School community. Out in Wellington at Wellington Middle School for our Wellington community who doesn't necessarily drive into town to access the materials here. And then we also had them for the DAB academic committee so that we had a parent population right there to get their hands a little bit dirty with the materials. And then we also had them by appointment here at the JSSC, so community members were able to schedule an appointment to come in and have kind of a private review with the materials. So as I talked about earlier, there was a feedback process among 4 different stakeholder groups. There were 4 different things that we truly were asking for feedback on. So one was the course content and the standards. We want to make sure that the materials were meeting our standards and our students' needs. The technology component, universal access, so access to all of our students, as well as the assessment component. We don't want to adopt a textbook series that fell short in any one of those 4 programs. We wanted the whole package for our teachers. So as you can see up there, we have our numbers for the amount of feedback that we got back, and we would like to really truly pat our community on the back for the amount of outreach that they had. Our understanding was that this was the first showing where truly people came in to pick up the textbooks and take the time to fill out the form. We had paper pencil ones as well as the online version for them to submit.
So we talked a lot about consensus in our committees, and we talked a lot about consensus, and that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody wants the exact same program, but that they could live with it after the voices of everyone have been heard. And so at the elementary school, our consensus was Envision Math 2.0. It is a Pearson product. This product, the strengths of it, it truly is very balanced between conceptual, procedural, and application. And so that was one of the things that was very important to us. Teachers are a little bit skeptical to teach conceptually because they don't even understand conceptually, because they weren't taught that way. So we needed a program that would help our teachers, help our students. So it's very balanced in that. It is very differentiated. Every single lesson can be taught with every kid being able to access the information, from kids who need intervention to kids who are gifted and talented and are light years ahead of the other students. It can all be taken care of in one lesson. There's even leveled homework for those kids. So they have multiple forms of representation. Each kid gets an online account, and parents can access their online account. They can have reteaching videos. They can have little quizzes to prepare themselves for assessments if they would like to do that. Lots of different ways for them to see it, lots of paper, pencil, lots of activities and manipulatives that they will be using in the classroom. It truly is accessible for all students, not only for leveled, as in homework, for intervention kids and gifted kids and the kids in between, but really truly for the ELL kids. There's ELL strategies in there. There's integrated services strategies. Every child can be reached with this, with these resources. And then the last thing is that the online activities will give kids instant feedback. So if they are working on an online activity and they don't understand what's going on, there are ways for them to click on, show me an example, and it will take them through step by step, or show me a video that I can watch. So it is instant for the kids at home and for the parents. Let's be really honest, the parents who are looking at it going, I don't understand how my kid is doing math. It can help the parents as well. It's instant at home.
At the middle school level, we went through the same consensus process as we did at elementary level, and the middle school committee would like to move forward with the Big Ideas textbook series. One of the major strengths for them was that it's course-specific materials. So I mentioned some of the different courses before, and we don't currently have textbooks that meet the needs of each of those courses, but they're pulling from 2 different resources, for example, for our 7th/8th math class. This textbook series, however, allows us to have an individual textbook for each one of the courses that we offer here in the district that's truly tailored to the students in those courses. The Big Ideas series has a very strong online presence. One of the major things that teachers and students truly appreciated that was the ability to individualize assignments. It truly takes a moment to recommend for teachers, if this is where students are at, here's an assignment that would be appropriate for them to meet their needs where they're at, as well as to push them a little bit further. As Kelly mentioned, the elementary program as well as the middle school program are very well-balanced programs, conceptually, procedurally, and through application. And then the parent supports and up-to-date information for this program was a huge convincing push when we looked through the parent and community feedback for it. Some of the supports around that include news briefings with regards to what is changing about the product, what are some of the updates on the product. There's a blog from the company just to keep parents up to date on every little nitty-gritty detail, including when their system has a blip or there's maintenance or something, rather than having the student that's sitting at home frustrated. There's information about when it'll be back up and everything else. So those are some great things. There's also video support for parents to help them understand the concepts so that they can help out their students at home. At the high school level, ironically, the committees independently went with the same product. So at the high school level, their consensus was reached also around big ideas. Very many of the same strengths for that program that we saw at the middle school level. So moving forward, some of the things that we've looked at with regards to this is we can't just hand teachers a brand new textbook, and none of the textbooks that we're looking at truly mimic the textbooks that we've had in the past. So there will be a significant amount of professional development involved with this. We'll be beginning that process during Summer Institute, so the first 2 weeks in June this summer. During that time, we'll be developing pacing guides and writing new assessments to go with the new materials. During next school year, the big push will be on August 15th and 16th to be able to provide professional development from each textbook publishing company for every teacher in our school district who will be interacting with these materials. At the elementary level throughout next year, they'll be going with the train the trainer model to be able to get information out to all of the staff within our schools. And at the middle school and high school level, they'll be looking at 4 full-day professional development sessions. Each one of those days will be geared towards what the teacher's needs are in that moment. So we haven't set them up in advance. We've chosen dates, and then we want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our teachers as they come up.
And before we get into questions, I noticed that one of our committee members arrived to the meeting, and I don't think she's prepared for this, but I'm going to invite Sherry Dvorak up. Sherry is one of our parent committee members, and Sherry, maybe you could just say a couple words around your experience as a parent on the committee.
Well, I can honestly tell you it was really a privilege for me to be a part of this process. I was just, I don't know, I was thrilled. I have a math degree, so that's part of what I put on my application is I do have a bit of a passion for math. But I would say that this is a very accurate representation of the process from beginning to end, and hearing it all in a little span of time is like, wow, we really did all that. What else would you like me to say?
I put you on the spot. I apologize. Thank you so much for being on the committee.
I'm game. Yeah.
Thank you. We had several parent and community representatives, and they put in a lot of time. And so I'm very thankful for the time that they put into it. I think we calculated that just meeting times, our teachers and members, probably over 40 hours into the process. Then you add the pilot process on top of that. That's a big commitment. I'm going to open it up for comments, questions.
Christoph.
So just in the short description of the curriculum, it sounds like I should start over and relearn math. It looks great. So I understand tonight's action is we'll be asked to approve the budget line item of about $1.5 million. Just quickly, it didn't seem like you mentioned the cost of each of these and how that was, or maybe I missed it, but are these all roughly in line cost-wise, and do they fit within the expectations I?
Sure, good question. We began planning for this several years ago and started squirreling away funds, acknowledging that a K-8 plus an algebra, geometry, algebra 2 adoption is a pretty large endeavor. We deliberately postponed this adoption until after the new state assessments were rolled out. This gave our teachers a authentic experience of really seeing how are the new standards being assessed. And so those were very deliberate, as was the budgeting. We use kind of a rule of thumb number per student cost, and these programs all came in with what our budgeting cost was expected, so that rule of thumb.
So no great variation from one to the other?
No,
that
actually,
would have to be weighed or?
Very close to being right on.
Rob?
Yeah, I've got a couple questions. First, I want to say that I'm super impressed with the process and with the documentation on that Google site and whatnot about everything that happened. So congratulations for running such a strong process, and thank you for all the work that went into that. Also, I appreciate very much the emphasis on differentiation in looking at the materials. It's important for all the kids to have an opportunity to sort of reach their potential in the math arena, as well as everywhere else, but since we're talking about math, so thanks very much on that. A couple of questions. The consensus model, did parents and/or students sort themselves as a group in terms of parents wanted this one and teachers wanted that one, or was it not separable by that means?
Yeah, go ahead.
So we didn't specifically ask any one of those 4 subgroups to choose one program or the other. We asked them information, and they filled out a survey using a Likert scale.
Sure.
And then the textbook adoption committees themselves looked at the data for each one of the programs, and then they also reviewed all of the commentary for each one of the programs. And then they were able to use the data and the commentary from the pilot process along with all of their previous feedback with regards to each one of the programs, and then they themselves came up with their recommendation for moving forward.
Okay, so maybe I didn't ask the question well. Did the data in that process reveal different preferences among the various subgroups of stakeholders?
No, I'd say that at each one of the levels, it seemed like each of the 4 groups of stakeholders seemed to weigh favorably.
Great.
In the same way.
Okay, good. You did mention in particular the middle school, and I suppose the high school one too, had a lot of materials to support parents in the new math, if you will. Not to reference the old new math. Get Tom Lehrer in here, but that's a different thing. So I guess there's a couple questions. One of them is, what's the strength in that area in the elementary arena? Because that's going to be important also. And is there some broad rollout for parents? It sounds like there's a way for the teachers to say, hey, look at this or whatever, but is there some broader rollout? Are we going to update the toolkit, the math parent toolkit site? What's the story around parents?
So for elementary, your question was around parent support.
Yeah.
So in this program, there's actually a parent letter for every single unit that would go home. It tells the parents exactly what mathematics we're trying to get at in the unit, and it even suggests activities for you to do at home to support your kids in furthering that mathematics. Not homework, but activities, fun stuff to do. And as well, the student online assignment that they're given, so they have one student login. It really is designed for both student and parent. It really is not just students, because the parents can watch the videos to help their kids with the homework. So it really is so encompassing of student and parent all together. So that, I think, is very strong. And I'm going to let Robert talk about the other question.
So the other piece, I think, we began our parent education piece, as many of the board members are aware of, a couple of years ago, when we developed a mathematical parent toolkit on our website.
Right.
We'll continue to update that. We're going to be working with our communications department pretty closely in terms of how can we provide additional resources to help parents, get access to these, as both facilitators mentioned, are really robust online components so that they can have more access at home. And I would say the other piece is videos and other educational pieces. I mean, part of it is we want to educate parents on the instructional materials, but we also want to educate parents and community on those big instructional shifts that we've talked about previously, and how math today does look a little bit different than when many of us were in elementary and middle high school.
I also wanted to talk about one more item that was pretty exciting, especially after we were talking with Darcy about the Safe to Tell. There is an app for each of the programs that you can download that is free. And so for when you're having your kids do their homework at soccer practice or piano practice or in between the next practice, you can see the videos on your smartphone or your tablet just like you could at home. So especially for those kids who don't have internet access at home, a lot of homes have at least a smartphone.
Carolyn?
Hi, thank you. So the Envision Math is a software-based tool, correct?
It's actually a textbook, so students will get
But-
textbooks, and then
okay.
there's also a digital component,
Okay,
correct?
so it is a software-based tutoring platform, though, that I heard you talking about that the kids can sign into?
Every student.
Okay, so what, I guess my question is that I'm supposing that they are, while the students are into the platform, that there are a lot of data points that are being collected that are going to help Envision improve their program. And so at the same time that they're collecting that data to improve their program, there's a fine line between improving their program and there's also that commercial use of that data. And I was wondering if there are any safeguards in place to protect student data.
Sure. This district takes student data privacy very seriously, as does, I would say, all the districts up and down the Front Range that I'm aware of. We've worked very closely, we being our members from the IT department, I've worked in close partnership with our counsel, Tom Crabb, in assuring that we are entering into an agreement that has the most up-to-date student privacy language to protect our students of what data that is actually going into the system, and that we can retrieve it back when we terminate this program at some future date. So we have those assurances that the data would be kept private, and our language meets the same language that the Colorado Department of Education has kind of measured as their bar, if you will.
Okay, so what you're saying is yes, we have safeguards in place to protect our students' privacy and the data that they're collecting while the kids are using this the software-based tutoring.
That is correct. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, Rob?
Yeah, I just have one other quick question. You talked about articulation in the grades and who was involved and whatnot. How about articulation into our pre-calculus and calculus levels? Do these programs prepare well for that, and have our pre-calculus and calculus teachers weighed in that regard?
So within our committees, I showed that each one of the teachers was representative of their group. However, a lot of our secondary teachers don't teach just that one prep. And so actually at the high school level, many of our teachers are also pre-calculus and calculus teachers within our district. As we would walk around during the meetings, that was certainly a conversation that they were having, as well as the conversation of our new standards for Algebra 2 being so extensive and actually stepping on the toes for what we've always considered pre-calculus and college algebra to be. They definitely felt like our textbooks at the high school level that we looked at definitely met that rigorous approach to prepare students for those courses.
Okay, Christoph.
I'd propose to make a motion, so.
Okay.
I'll move that the board approves the purchase agreement and adopts this Pearson Envision Mathematics 2.0 curriculum for K through 5.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this item? Okay, I think we're ready for a vote.
I'm a big fan of math, yes.
Aye.
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 Oh, I'm sorry. Go math. It looks like we've got a new elementary math adoption. So thank you very
All
much
right,
for
yeah.
sticking with us all the way through this. And I have had a request for a break.
Can I just make one more
Yes,
comment before you break?
absolutely.
So we brought to you the elementary agreement, and I alluded to the fact that we're finalizing a secondary agreement. I'd hope to have it ready for the May 24th meeting. So if it's with the pleasure of the board, I'd love to just put that on the consent agenda, or we can come back and provide this in-depth information, but
That's what we typically do. Is everybody okay bringing that back on the consent agenda?
great.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you guys again for staying with us so long this evening. We do appreciate it. We are going to take a 10-minute break. We will, well, now it's 9 minutes. We'll reconvene at 8:55. Well, I'm sorry. If I said we were going to reconvene at 8:56, it would turn into 9 o'clock. So, 8:55. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the second exciting half of the May 10th, 2016 Board of Education meeting. We are on to 9.0 discussion items, and our first item that we're going to be talking about tonight is revisions to board policies, EL 2.1, EL 2.2, and GP 3.12. And what we did is we had a retreat a few weeks ago, and we asked our counsel, Tom Crabb, to come back to us with some wording suggestions on how we might improve our procedures where citizens might want to bring issues to the board. So, Mr. Crabb.
Briefly, as the board knows, the process for approving policy revisions is a two-part process, 2 readings, and these 3 policies are being brought before the board on first reading. And I think by way of background, what might be more helpful is explaining the reasons for the recommended revisions as opposed to trying to describe them. I think that the language is relatively self-evident as written. But basically, the primary revisions are in GP 3.12, specifically Section 6, and the proposed revisions rewrite Section 6. And Section 6 was added a few years ago based on language in EL 2.1 and EL 2.2. And that language basically says in those 2 policies collectively that the superintendent shall not prevent any employee from addressing or from grieving to the board under certain circumstances, and also the superintendent shall not prevent students, parents, or guardians, or the general public from grieving to the board when they've exhausted internal grievance procedures and the person alleges that board policy has been violated to their detriment. The concern discussed at the retreat was that the language grieving perhaps was narrower than the whole scope of issues that could be raised by employees, students, parents, guardians, and the general public, and that the policy that's been put in place in GP 3.12 to deal with grievances is sort of a rigid one-size-fits-all policy that doesn't allow the board to tailor its response, if a response is even warranted, based on the facts and circumstances of each case. So with that in mind, the language of EL 2.1 and 2.2 has been suggested for revision so that it says rather than prevent employees, students, parents, guardians, or the general public from grieving to the board, that language has been replaced with language that's broader that says prevent them from addressing complaints and concerns to the board. And I think that that's broad enough to include and to cover grievances, but it's not limited to that. And so this allows the board to consider a broader range of complaints and concerns rather than just grievances. With respect to the policy, GP 3.12, in terms of how that's dealt with, we're actually changing the title of the Section 6, proposing that that be done, changing it from grievances to responding to written complaints and concerns expressed by students, parents / guardians, members of the general public, and employees. And what this does, rather than having, like I said, a one-size-fits-all grievance process for every time a written grievance is filed with the board, this gives the board a process by which to decide on an individual facts and circumstances basis how it wants to address complaints and concerns that are addressed to it in writing. And it makes it clear that this process applies to responses by the Board of Education as a whole. Individual board members are, of course, free to respond from their own point of view, but responses on behalf of the board, that's what this process applies to. There was one question that I'd like to try to address, and I don't know if you have these on your computers, how it'd be easy to find it. The pages of the policies aren't numbered, but it is on the 6th page, and it's item 6C, and then in parentheses 1. And what that section says is it's the first step in the process. When a written complaint or a concern is addressed separately to one or more but fewer than all board members who wish the complaint or concern to be addressed by the board as a whole, or when the complaint's addressed to the board as a whole, the first step is if the matter is not one regarding which board members have personal knowledge, a copy of the written complaint or concern shall be provided to the superintendent. The intent there is that in matters where the board doesn't have the information regarding which they've received a complaint or concern, and that often comes up when it's action taken by the administration. Many times the way the board first finds out about it is a receipt of the complaint or concern. First step in the process is to refer the matter to the superintendent, who shall then in turn utilize district staff and other resources to investigate the matter as necessary to determine the facts, and then to provide the information to the board to take the next step on whether it wants to respond, and if so, how. The other thing that C1 talks about, though, is regardless of whether board members have personal knowledge of the matter, if the board wishes to have additional information, even if the board was the one that took the action and has a lot of knowledge about what happened, it can still refer a copy of the complaint to the superintendent to get information to advise it on how it wishes to proceed. So basically, it's completely up to the board in its discretion if it wants additional information, even if it knows a little or a lot about the matter in question. But what the policy does say is that if the board doesn't have this personal information, then the policy presumes that the matter should be referred to the superintendent as a first step for her to get information for the board to determine how it wishes to proceed. So with that background and introduction, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Christoph.
Okay, I wanted to jump in here. So it's been a little while since we've gotten this, so see how this goes on. I had 2 or 3, so I don't know if you want me to. Okay, so the first one, or one of the ones, was specifically on that C1. Let me make sure. Let me read my notes. But it was that word "shall," and it's the first word "shall." So if the matter is not one regarding which board members have personal knowledge, et cetera, a copy of the written complaint or concern shall be provided to the superintendent. And I thought maybe that should be maybe provided to the superintendent, so that we have the discretion to do what we wish to. And it struck me there are a number of times where we may not want to forward it. Am I misunderstanding what you wanted, what the intent was there?
I think you're missing an important word.
Okay.
Now, if you, let's just read through that. It says, if the matter is not one regarding which the board members have personal knowledge, okay, so that's one circumstances. Board does not have personal knowledge. Or if the board wishes to have additional information, it shall be submitted to the superintendent. So if the board wishes that, the board has complete control in that second case, but you are correct, and I can change it if you'd like, but the intent there is that in cases where the board does not have personal knowledge of the matter, the intent is to require the first step to be for the board to refer it to the superintendent so that information can be gotten. But I think when it said, I wouldn't focus too much on wishes in the second case, Christoph, because I'm sorry, I wouldn't focus too much on the word shall, because that shall only applies if the board wishes the matter to be referred. So it's obvious if the board wishes it, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I could go, the way you're saying it, I'd be fine with it. I have to admit, I did miss the word wishes, so maybe it leaves it. I just think we want to make it the prerogative of the board, whatever they want to do there, but I think you're saying that covers it, so. So let's see, let me, yeah, on section 6.b, and I realized in looking at this again, if you look at the heading, so that would be on page 5. So 6 says responding to written complaints. Then there's referral in A to orally or in writing. And then we get to B, and we say individual board members who receive written complaints may respond on their own behalf, but may not respond. And it struck me we need to somewhat be consistent. I mean, is this section talking about written complaints, written and oral complaints? Is there some reason in B that it doesn't cover oral complaints?
The reason that oral complaints are addressed in 6A really sort of carries forward from when the prior board drafted this in the first place, and one of their concerns, which the intent here was to carry forward in 6A, was just to make it crystal clear that students, parents, guardians, members of the public, and employees aren't required to address their complaints and concerns to the board in writing, that they can also do it orally. So the idea was to make it clear that, look, we're not trying to constrain or dictate to these people how they express their complaints and concerns to the board. They're welcome to do it orally, but if they want, if the board wants to respond in a more formal manner, which is what this provides, it's got to be in writing.
Okay, now section 6B talks about the role of a board member. So an individual board member who receives written complaints may respond on their own behalf. And it strikes me that the same holds true if they receive an oral complaint. They may also only respond on their own behalf. And so the point there being that you have discussed oral complaints as well as written complaints and in A. So we may need to be consistent as we work our way through. The same would be true. I mean, this is more for board behavior, but it strikes me we may want to be consistent as we work our way through this.
I'm happy to put that in there.
Okay.
The second sentence in 6A does say that unless otherwise provided by law, the employee agreement, or a district policy or regulation, written complaints and concerns shall be handled in accordance with the terms and conditions basically set forth below. But I can go ahead and add oral. The only reason, I could either take it out in 6A, or if you want it throughout, I can, but the idea was that this sort of more formal process for dealing with it lends itself more to written complaints because of the certainty and the specificity that it allows people to deal with. An oral complaint, I think, you know, sometimes people just want to express themselves, and it doesn't trigger this. It's not intended to trigger this process.
And I'll just add that I think the murkiness that we've been seeing ourselves involved in says that complaints may come at us in any form. I see what you're saying about the formality, and I would just lean on whatever anybody else says.
Well,
I'm throwing it out there. So.
One more comment in that regard. This doesn't say so, but I would expect that if board members are hearing oral complaints only and they're not getting anything in writing, that they might say, look, if you want us to deal with this in a little bit more formal manner, we're going to have, the specificity. Just put something in writing, and then we're off to the races.
Okay, David and then Rob?
On section 6C3, it says if it is determined that board action is not required, and that kind of language is used several, is there any case where the board is compelled to act whether it wants to or not? Because this whole section to me was kind of written in, we have a choice to consider or not consider what the people are dealing with. Are there any categories that we are compelled to deal with? In other words, if we tell somebody, we don't think you have any merit, we don't want to talk to you, and the person says, I want to, and demands that, can they override that judgment? Is there a process to override that judgment?
If I understand your question correctly, and incidentally, it says if it is not determined that board action is required.
Right.
Which is different than saying if it is determined that board action is not required. And we did that on purpose because the board doesn't have to take action at all. But I think the short answer to your question is that it is solely the board's determination as to whether, and if so how, it wants to respond to complaints and concerns. And the people who raise them under this, members of the public, employees, students, parents, and guardians, can't compel the board to respond if the board doesn't want to.
Okay.
I think that's your question.
Okay, Rob?
Yeah, I think that there are, so responding to what David just said, I think that the business about the, in 6A that talks about unless otherwise provided by law or the employment agreement or district policy, those are the things that would compel us to do something if we wanted to or not wanted to. So I think that's already covered. With respect to the concern you raised about oral versus written, I understand why it might seem confusing that the 6A talks about orally. I understand the reasoning you gave. I don't feel strongly about having that in there one way or the other, but I do feel strongly that if the board is going to consider acting on something, that it needs to be in writing. Because otherwise, we get telephone tag. We get, he said, and then I tell you, and you heard something else, and you tell Dr. Smizer, and she's heard something else, and we'll never hear all the same thing. So I think the writing part is important to trigger the rest of the thing. Whether the orally is in 6A or not, I understand why it's there, but I don't feel strongly about it.
If the word, I'll just reiterate that if the word orally is confusing things, I guess my suggestion would be to take it out, because I think that the intent, just look at the title, responding to written complaints, et cetera, in 6, and that's what this is about. And that doesn't mean that it can't be raised orally. Again, I put it in there because the prior board was concerned that they didn't want to discourage people that just wanted to talk to somebody and not feel like they had to put it in writing. And I think that is generally understood, but that's the only reason it's in there, and I'm happy to take it out because it sounds like it's confusing things.
Nate?
I think you should leave it in, because in my mind it says they can complain either orally or in writing, and if they want it dealt with in this manner, there's a process to deal with it, but in order to have it dealt with, it's got to be in writing, like Rob said. And I think the language is good in all 3 policy revisions.
Christoph?
Okay, and I kind of concur with what Rob's saying, that I would almost remove the oral, just keep the confusion out there, but it's not a big deal. But it does, does it say that we would require a written complaint somewhere in order for us to take action, or really?
But
if it doesn't, then I like Rob's point.
I think it's implicit in B and C, frankly, because it only talks about written there. That's the way I read it.
I see it oral. In Oh, in A, I see that
Yes,
it's,
in oral,
it's
absolutely.
suggesting that you can do an oral complaint in
Right,
number A.
but
So I
the-
would, the
but-
simple answer would be just get rid of it. Anybody can always do an oral complaint, so.
I'm happy to do either way, and I guess I would say that whichever way I go, if there's one or more board members that wish that I went a different way, the way it can be dealt with at the next meeting is to just propose a revision. Move that it be revised. I guess at this point, if there's some sort of a thumbs up or thumbs down about which version you'd like to see come back on May 24th.
Let's do thumbs up if you want to keep it. If you don't care, thumbs to the side. And if you want to take out the written and orally in that sentence, then thumbs down.
No,
Does
it's
that make
just
sense?
taking out orally. We're not,
Or, okay,
written
fine.
stays.
I'm doing sideways if you don't care, because I don't really care personally.
I care, but it's okay either way.
Okay, it looks like a virtual tie. I see a thumb up, a thumb down, and a bunch of sideways. So. Okay. Oh. Okay. Great. Any other thoughts on this language? I think if there aren't, we could probably have it brought back on consent agenda as an action item at the May 24th meeting.
And that's with the language as is that correct?
With the language as is, yes. Nate?
Since this is first reading, what's the process? The thumbs up is the first reading?
Well, the first reading is to discuss it and see if
Discuss it,
there's
okay.
issues that the board has that they want changed or questions that they want answered, sort of what we've gone through. And then action is typically not taken until the second meeting. And if there's enough changes that need to be done, we can have, and have in the past, had 3 or more readings.
Okay.
But if you don't
Thanks.
like it in 2 weeks and you change your mind or whatever, we can always pull it off of the consent agenda. Any member of the board can always pull any item off of the consent agenda, and we can rehash it some more. Okay.
Well, and one more thing for the board to keep in mind, and this is always true for any of the board's policies, is that as you're working with them and as time goes by, you periodically review them. That's formally built into what you do at your meetings, but if there's a problem that arises while you're applying it, that's a good time to say, hey, this isn't working, let's make some changes. So this isn't set in stone. It is a fairly significant change from the way it's been in the past, but if this isn't working or there's some concerns that arise, we can always change it in the future.
Okay, well, thank you very much on this
Thank you.
topic, everybody, and I think that brings us to 9.2, Board of Education budget. Mr. Montoya.
Good evening. In the board packet is a discussion draft of the 2016-17 board budget. Did I just lose that? Oh, there it goes. Okay. And so what I've done is prepared a schedule very similar to what we've done in the past. What it shows is year-to-date activity. And for those that are keeping track, that should say 3/31/2016, or actually a year. We're in 2016 now. Forgot to update that one. I also include projected remaining and then what the projected total would be for the board's budget year. And the draft, on the right-hand side of your sheet, under the 16-17 column, you can see the discussion draft. That is the budget that I would propose that the board consider next year. It's the same budget that you had last year. I did get some questions in the board packet around the travel and why is that below budget this year. I believe that there was a decision not to attend the NABC NSBA, thank you, that conference, and so that shows that you came in under budget there. In talking with Ms. Oppenheimer, the board secretary, my understanding is that the NASB Board Association, thank you. Gosh, it's getting late. That is going to be held in Denver, and that it's likely that most, if not all, board members will be attending that since it's local. And for that reason, and then also I would also anticipate that you would attend the CASB conference like you do annually also. So combination of both of those taking place next year, I believe that the $35,000 budget is warranted next year. So I don't see that you're going to need to modify your budget moving forward next year. The only place that maybe there could be some question is the boardroom technology. You'll see that there's a line item for $7,500 for technology. I believe that was in place. We were planning on doing some laptops and things this year. So if you wanted to reallocate some of that, you could. You don't need to do that tonight. What we're talking about is the total line item, the $138,000. We can always shift between the categories during the fiscal year if we need to.
Thank you. Any other thoughts or questions? Thank you for putting this together for us, Dave. We do appreciate it.
Welcome.
We also appreciate that you can talk numbers when all of us are sort of starting to rub our eyes at night. So
I can do numbers, but I obviously cannot do letters. So.
No, the numbers are good. Okay, that brings us to 9.3, legislative discussion. Well, I'm just going to give a brief update for those who aren't aware of it and don't follow it as closely as we do. The end of the legislative session in Colorado is tomorrow at midnight. We don't know if they'll go till tomorrow at midnight. I was just checking on my phone because I've been following the tweets from Chalkbeat, Colorado, and the most recent one, 52 minutes ago, says, charter funding compromise a done deal. 2 standalone charter bills killed. Some charter provisions remain in another bill, which means that hopefully, I think that means now they'll be able to get to the School Funding Act, which is 1422, and maybe they'll get the School Funding Act passed tonight. We're hopeful that we will have funding for schools next year. Yeah, personally, I think one of the most important things that we can do at this point, because it's a little late for any lobbying on any bills that haven't been done, and I don't think there's anything really outstanding that we had overly strong opinions about, is really preparation for what we want to do in the next year. Because really, if we don't get to, we wanted to start determining our legislative agenda and have proposals on the table by our last meeting in June. We have 2 meetings in June. One is our board meeting, our regular business session. One's a retreat, which is 2 days after that. So hopefully we can make some progress. One thing I would like to bring back to the board at the next meeting on May 24th is a resolution in support of the proposed Initiative 117, which would remove, by the way, the hospital provider fee was also killed today, finally. We expected it would die, not that we wanted it to die, but that would have said that they could spend money instead of returning it to voters. Well, kind of, because it would have reclassified some of the money in the general fund to make it a separate enterprise zone, but that's a whole different thing. But what 117 does is it would remove the Tabor cap, so it means that the state would be able to keep the revenue, the taxes that it collects, instead of having to return it to voters. And that money would get spent on 35% at least on education, at least 35% on transportation, and the rest would be split between, I don't know if it's evenly split, but between mental health and senior services. And I think this is our opportunity to raise the Tabor cap, because otherwise the hospital provider fee is going to continue to grow, and it's causing problems, because what happens is for every time somebody fills a hospital bed, there's a $6 fee that they pay that's matched by the federal government. So it's not a tax, it's merely a way, and that money is put into a pot that helps us serve people who can't otherwise afford care. And so it's money that's put to good use, and we're getting a subsidy because of that from the government. So if we start taking less money, we'll actually have less money overall to help people, which means that we will have, it's just it's not a good spiral that we want to get into. Anyway, that was one of the things, if anybody had questions about 117 or anything, but I was going to bring a proposal next time that a resolution that we support that. Was I at all coherent? I think I'm getting tired. Okay. Does anybody else have any thoughts or questions about what's gone on in the legislative session and overall? Any questions? Okay, well, I think we've done a pretty good job of keeping up with it. Our board subcommittee has met every single week, that we've had a board meeting. We're also going to continue to meet at 4 o'clock prior to our 2 remaining regularly scheduled board meetings for the year so that we can get a handle on our legislative agenda for next year. And we would certainly welcome suggestions from the superintendent and staff and all the board members as to what you all would like to see on that legislative agenda for next year. So if you could start thinking about it and let anybody on the legislative committee know what your thoughts are and preferences as we start the process. I know it seems really early, but if we don't get it done in June, we're already behind. So thank you. Okay. Does that mean that we are ready for a motion? Would somebody like to make a motion? Here. I think somebody down there wants to make a motion. Okay, we're going to recognize Director Fevrin for the purposes of making a motion.
I move that the board go into executive session in the superintendent's office conference room as authorized under CRS 24-6-402, Section 4F, to discuss personnel matters related to feedback on the superintendent's job performance. Individuals invited to join the board in executive session are Superintendent Sandra Smizer, Legal and Policy Counsel Tom Crabb, and Assistant Board Secretary Myra Freeman.
Rob seconds the motion. I think we're ready for a vote.
Yes.
Aye.
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 Okay, so this is it for our televised portion of this evening's program. After executive session, we will come out and we will adjourn for the evening. So thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate it. Have a great night.